The Liberal government is pulling out the legislative hammer to get Ontario college students back into class, but there's a major hurdle standing in the way. Our Marianne Dimain is on the story and is standing by at George Brown College this morning. Marianne, what's the latest?
Well, Carolyn, we know that the provincial Liberals tried to introduce back-to-work legislation which would have put an immediate end to the 5-week-long college strike across the province. It would have forced faculty back to work and had students back in the classroom in just a matter of days. But the NDP blocked that, which means the strike continues and students remain out of class. Now, all of this comes after developments yesterday that saw the union vote to reject the college's latest offer. That led to negotiations between both sides, but when a deal wasn't reached by a 5 p.m. deadline yesterday, the province stepped in and tried to introduce that back-to-work legislation. Of course, the NDP blocked that attempt, and that prompted the Minister of Advanced Education, Deb Matthews, to say that this is only hurting the 500,000 college students who have been left out of class, now worried about what this means about their school year and the money they've paid for class.
We're at the point now where students are in danger of losing those semesters. That's a terrible place to be. We need to move. We need to move now. We need to get the students back to work for Monday, the faculty back in the classrooms for Monday, so they're going to have a lot of work to do to catch up. But the semester still is salvageable now. If the NDP has its way, we will see students losing their semester, and that is a disastrous outcome.
And it's definitely an outcome students don't want, but in a statement, the NDP said New Democrats will not support any legislation that takes away the rights of any workers in this province. Kathleen Wynne is failing both college students and their instructors with their actions today. So the provincial Liberals will try to introduce that back-to-work legislation again today. If that does not happen, there may be a rare weekend sitting in this legislature, which doesn't happen because they are determined to try to get the students back in class by sometime next week. At this point, it could be late next week or into the week after that. As for the college and the union, they are pointing at each other when it comes to who's to blame for the fact that a deal hasn't been reached. OPSU has long maintained that one of the sticking points remains academic freedom, and they want a fair deal to be reached at the bargaining table. They say it's reprehensible that the colleges have left students out of class for this long, and they've also called for the members of the College Employer Council to resign. Carolyn, I'll send it back to you.
All right. Thank you, Marianne. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the morning show. The Liberal government is pulling out the legislative hammer to get Ontario college students back to class. But there is a major hurdle standing in the way. Our Marianne Dimain is on this story and joins us outside George Brown College with the very latest. Marianne.
Good morning, Carolyn. Since the strike began 5 weeks ago, students have just wanted to get back to class. So that is why the province stepped in yesterday, trying to get back to work legislation so that faculty would be forced back to work and get students back in the class as early as Monday. But the NDP blocked that, and that is why the strike continues and classes remain canceled. Now, all of this comes after developments yesterday after the union voted to reject the college's latest offer. That led to negotiations between both sides, but when a deal was not reached by the 5 p.m. deadline yesterday, that is when the province stepped in and tried to get back to work legislation in motion. Now, because this is not happening now, the legislation, or rather the province, says that they will continue to try to introduce back to work legislation today. If it doesn't happen, they will have a rare weekend sitting in the legislature to try to get kids back to class. Yesterday, the union says they don't want to be forced back to work, but they understand what the students are going through.
We're not, as a labor movement, pleased that workers are being legislated back to work, but take that hat off, put a hat on as an educator, as a parent, as a citizen of Ontario. We are happy that the students will be back in class as early as Monday.
Now, in a statement, the NDP said New Democrats will not support any legislation that takes away the rights of any workers in this province. Kathleen Wynne is failing both college students and their instructors with their actions today, and so it continues. The province will try, or the Liberals rather, will try to get back to work legislation on the go so that students can get back in class as early as sometime next week. But as we know, it is the students who are really the ones who have been caught in the middle here, and the province says it is the students who are really suffering. Carolyn, I'll send it back to you.
They sure are. All right, thank you, Marianne. The government is pulling out the legislative hammer to get Ontario college students back into class, but there's a major hurdle standing in the way. Our Marianne Dimain is following the story and joins us outside George Brown College this morning with the very latest. Marianne.
Good morning, Carolyn. The provincial Liberals wanted to get faculty back to work, students back in class with back to work legislation yesterday, but the NDP blocked that, which means the strike continues and classes remain cancelled. Of course, all of this came after the union voted to reject the college's latest offer. That led to negotiations between both sides, but when a deal was not reached by a 5 p.m. deadline, that is when the province stepped in. The Liberals then tried to introduce that back to work legislation, and they will try again to do it today because the Minister of Advanced Education says it is the 500,000 college students who are stuck in the middle.
Students have suffered enough. They've experienced enough anxiety. We've got a path to get them back in the classroom on Monday, but we cannot do that with the support, without the support of the other parties.
Now, since this strike began 5 weeks ago, students have been wondering what this will mean for their school year and, of course, all of that money they've paid for classes that they have not been able to attend. The provincial Liberals say they will again try to have back-to-work legislation passed. If not, there could be a rare weekend sitting in the legislature to try to get students and faculty back inside the schools. Carolyn, I'll send it back to you.
All right, thank you, Marianne. We're also keeping an eye outside the Chelsea Hotel on Gerrard Street. Union members are meeting there in preparation for arbitration. The picket lines, meanwhile, are coming down today. Welcome to the morning show. The Liberal government is pulling out the legislative hammer to get Ontario college students back in class, but there's a major hurdle standing in the way. Let's go to Marianne, who's on top of the story and is outside George Brown College with the very latest. Marianne.
Good morning, Carolyn. We could have seen students returning back to class as early as Monday, faculty also back at work if that back to work legislation was passed yesterday, but it was blocked by the NDP, which means classes remain canceled at 24 colleges across the province, and that strike continues. Of course, all of this comes after 12,000 striking faculty workers from colleges all across the province voted to reject the college's latest offer. That led to negotiations between both sides, but when a deal wasn't reached by a 5 p.m. deadline yesterday, that is when the province stepped in and tried to introduce back-to-work legislation. The NDP, of course, said no. They don't believe, according to a statement they released yesterday, of violating workers' rights. And now that's leading to the fact that students still don't know what's happening with their school year. This morning, OPSEU President Warren Smokey Thomas spoke to our morning show, and this is what he had to say.
What we're saying is the college system is being grossly mismanaged, and we want the government to do something about it. They're legislating the workers back to work. You know what, if I was the Premier, I'd probably do that too, but she's got to understand there's going to be consequences to that. That legislation is probably illegal. We'll honor it, we'll go back to work, but I'll be talking to our lawyers later today about what we'll do, but the students will be back in the class. I hope Monday. That's up to the college, the college management now, but we're preparing to go back in on Monday. But there will be, the fight's far from over, let's put it that way.
So the fight far from over for the union, but for students, they just want to get back in the class. This is the longest college strike in the province's history. The provincial Liberals saying that if they are not successful in reintroducing the back-to-work legislation today, there could be a rare weekend sitting in the legislature to try to get kids back in class sometime next week. I'll send it back to you, Carolyn.
All right, thank you, Marianne. We're also keeping an eye outside the Chelsea Hotel on Gerrard Street. Union members are meeting there in preparation for arbitration. The picket lines are coming down today. We'll have all the developments throughout the day on globalnews.ca/Toronto. The Liberal government is pulling out the legislative hammer to get Ontario college students back into class, but there's a major hurdle standing in the way. Our Marianne Dimain is covering the story and is outside George Brown College with the very latest. Marianne.
Good morning, Carolyn. We could see students back inside classrooms like at George Brown College or any of the other 24 colleges that have been on strike for the past 5 weeks now if the provincial Liberals are able to pass back-to-work legislation. They tried yesterday, but it was blocked by the NDP, which says that violates workers' rights. So the provincial Liberals will start again today to try to force workers back onto the job so that classes can resume and everything can go, quote, back to normal as they can be after this strike. And if that doesn't work, they are willing to go right through to the weekend. They want kids back in school next week. This is the longest running college strike in provincial history, and that has left 500,000 college students wondering what this means for their school year, and not to mention the tuition that they've spent on classes that they have not been able to attend. Minister of Advanced Education Deb Matthews has said that this has gone on way too long, and really it is the students that have suffered, but the union says the fight is far from over.
We're at the point now where students are in danger of losing those semesters. That's a terrible place to be. We need to move. We need to move now. We need to get the students back to work for Monday.
As a parent, you want them back. But as a union leader, I want to see the legislation today, and we'll decide what we'll do. But we will go back to work. In the labor world, you call it sort of complying grief. You do as you do as you're ordered to. But there will be some challenges to the legislation later. I just don't know what form they'll take. It depends on what's in there.
So union officials will be meeting today to determine what the next steps will be. But we could see, depending on what happens today into the weekend, we could see students and faculty back in class as early as Monday, putting an end to the strike that has lasted now for 5 weeks. Carolyn, I'll send it back to you.
All right, thank you, Marianne. And we're also keeping an eye outside the Chelsea Hotel on Gerrard Street. Union members are meeting in preparation for arbitration. The picket lines are coming down today. We'll have all the developments throughout the day on globalnews.ca/Toronto.